So first, thanks to all the organizers. It's not only me. I'm good at all the technical things, but also for Eyal Davidson for pushing to this conference and having this idea that it should such a conference should happen, and to all the academic committees that joined this, to Shimon Gibson, to Katia, to Yossi Garfinkel, and Amit Rehem. So thank you all, and of course to the Begin Center for hosting this with all the logistics, and also to David Sterling, who sponsored the publication of the proceedings articles. So thank you all. And actually the issue that I'm going to speak now is essential for it's fundamental question that we have been dealing with since the inception of the Temple Mount Sifting project, an issue which bears a direct impact on the archaeological context of the finds that have been recovered.
In 2012, we published in a footnote the conclusions that we are now presenting here. And in this paper that we will be submitting to the conference book, we elaborate upon it with an overview and a detailed evidence. Most of the soil that is sifted in the Temple Mount Sifting project originates from a pit 12 meters deep that was excavated in November 1999 without archaeological supervision in an area north of the underground structure known as Solomon Stables, near the Temple Mount southeastern corner. This earth is designated in the project records as Area K. Additional soil that was removed a few months later when the ground level north to that pit was lowered by an average of about half a meter. In order to pave the area, this soil was designated in the project records as Area T. The excavations of the area north of Solomon Stables revealed that the stables were standing out in the open, and that in antiquity, this was not an underground structure as it is today. In 2001, Dan Bat suggested that an open air court north to the structure was sloping downwards from north to south as a result of an earthquake in 1033 CE that collapsed the southern retaining wall. According to Bat, sometime after the Crusader period, this entrance was refilled, probably with earth imported from the southeastern hill, the area of the city of David. Other scholars, as well as the authors of this paper, suggested that the level of the platform of the entire eastern area was originally lower, even prior to the 1033 earthquake. Saint Laurent and Awad elaborated upon this understanding by adding further evidence and suggesting that during the early Islamic period, there was an arcade leading from the Golden Gate to the Solomon Stables. The level of the Golden Gate is lower than the current platform level, and it's approximately 5.5 meters above the level of Solomon Stables. Thus, the platform between the two structures was probably sloping slightly downwards. Question remains regarding when and how the ground level in this area was raised. Is it a fill or an accumulation of dumps? And what was the origin of the soil? And why was it dumped in this location? It is noteworthy that the first time Solomon Stables was described as an underground structure was only in the late 15th century by the Jerusalem Qadi Mujir al-Din. Before this, the historical sources describe it simply as a structure at the lower part of the Haram enclosure. In the famous drawing by Edhard Rubich, who accompanied the German traveler Bernhard von Breidenbach in 1483, many small heaps of dirt can be seen in the eastern area of the Temple Mount. Other historical sources from the Mamluk period through the Ottoman period imply that the eastern area consisted of an accumulation of debris and rubbish, and some of it was even dumped within Solomon Stables. Many of these dirt heaps were cleared in 1891, but some remained and were only removed in 1996 is a 1996 renovation when they converted the structure to the Marwani Mosque. A tradition passed by the guards of the Dome of the Rock and recorded by Ernest Richmond in 1918 noted that the remains of the mosaic that were removed in the 16th century from the exterior walls of the structure were buried in various places in the Harem area, including the area near the eastern staircase of the raised platform. In 1865, Charles Wilson described the area north of the north and south of the Golden Gate as a place that contains an accumulation of rubbish. Another very interesting account from 1882 by Clermont Ganneau described that the area near the eastern wall was full of debris that contained pottery shards, mosaic tesserae, marble tiles, slabs, etc. In 1946, Cedric Jones was mentioned in the previous lectures twice. So this was a surprise that this this whole session focuses on this very minor excavation, but probably very important. And now, as we heard from Shimon Gibson, new documents came from this excavation, and what we can see here is the only document we knew about for it, and this appears in the archives from the British Mandate period. But apparently there were more. There's much more data from this excavation. So in this report, he also documented renovation debris from the Mamluk and Ottoman periods inside the barrel vault under the eastern staircase. And there's a few levels over there, but apparently there's even a level from the Iron Age. A section of a long trench 17 meters north of the raised platform that was excavated in 2007 in order to install a new electrical wire revealed that the layers under the topsoil appeared to be sloping sharply eastward. Now, after reviewing some selected data, as well as having studied other data that we cannot present here due to the time constraints, we can conclude that the ground level of the eastern side of the Temple Mount was raised by a continuous and long-term process of debris dumping, and not by a single earth-fill project like was suggested prior to the Sifting project. This conclusion is strongly supported by a rare photograph taken in November 1999 by the late Susan Singer, who was a managing director of Biblical Archaeology Review and just recently passed away several months ago. The photo shows a cross-section that was created by the excavation in a portion of the earth that was not yet removed at the time of the picture. It was, of course, moved and cleaned up later on, unfortunately with no supervision. And we could learn a lot from these from this section if it was documented properly. And maybe this cross-section clearly shows various stratified layers that were accumulated at this location. This pattern does not resemble that of a deliberate fill. The question that remains now are these: when did this process begin, and what is the origin of these dumps? One way to address this question is to analyze the data of the pottery shards recovered from the sifting. This data consists of several samples of pottery shards classified according to their state of preservation. All the shards in which the vessel wall below the rim was preserved to a length that is longer than 3 times its width were defined as sample A. All the shards with preserved rims which have a wall shorter than rim sample A were defined as sample B, but they have whole rims. We have also other samples, but we are dealing now here only with A and B. But the idea is that to have a sample, because shards that preserved in a better way also provide more information and more data. So, and we cannot compare this data with samples that don't have this data and have these missing values. So this is why we have this classification, and some analysis will be done on the sample A, some or both of them. Pottery shards tend to be preserved better in primary deposits, and each time they are redeposited, they tend to get smaller due to fragmentation. Thus, pottery shards in destruction layers and refuse deposits will be in a best preservation state. Now, considering this, we checked the proportion between the frequency count of sample A rims and sample B rims for each period. A higher percentage of sample A rims will be associated with a better preservation and less deposition phases. So as you can see here, we are comparing two major areas from the Temple Mount that were removed from the Temple Mount soil that was removed. Area K comes, as I said, from the pit and also Solomon Stables, and T from the topsoil that was lowered for paving. And these two major areas are compared to sample sites from Jerusalem, and I'll speak about this soon. But you can see that, for example, in the Crusader Ayyubid period, you have a very high percentage of A rims, more than other periods. But this doesn't mean much, because we have to know what to expect. Maybe this is the way that that the pottery in this period is preserved and fractures. So since the preservation state of pottery is also associated with the characteristics of the pottery and the cultural use traits in each period, we had to overcome this bias by comparing the percentage of type A rims from the Temple Mount to those originating in control groups taken from various locations in Jerusalem. These control groups were also sifted by us and went through the same methodological sorting process as the material from the Temple Mount. From the result of examining the ratio between the Temple Mount rims and those from the Jerusalem control groups, it is clearly visible that since the Mamluk period, and especially in that period, there is a much greater preservation of pottery shards from the Temple Mount as compared to other sites in Jerusalem. And you can clearly see that from comparing K and T to the Jerusalem sites, you can see since the Mamluk period, it jumps to even 5 or 6 times higher than in other sites in Jerusalem, and this means this was a dumping site at that area in this period. And interestingly, in the Ayyubid period, we don't see this. And even though over years the pottery is sorted together, it's classified together with the Crusader period, still the Ayyubid period should have been reflected here if it was a dump site during that period. So we are speaking now that we can see here clear evidence that since the Mamluk period, the pottery behaves like pottery from all destruction layers or refuse. But this area in the southeastern area, because we know about no destruction, and even earthquake destruction, there's no structures that we know about in that area. So there's no reason to presume that there was some kind of a destruction, but mainly refuse that was dumped in that area. The 1999 excavation north of Solomon Stables exposed the remains of a multi-phase structure existing in the eastern side of the pit. John Seligman, who was the Israel Antiquities Authority district archaeologist at that time of the excavation, attempted to date the phases of this structure. Seligman identified 4 phases since the Umayyad period till the early Ottoman period. Phase 3 was dated to the Ayyubid Mamluk period. It includes wall number 2 that supports a lifted terrace and marks the rising of the ground level in this area. It is also the phase in which the northern archways of Solomon's Stables were blocked. The data presented above indicate that the major accumulation of debris occurred during the Mamluk period, and this could be explained by the many construction projects that were carried out during this time, mainly on the northern and western walls. When analyzing these, I'm speaking about all the madrasas and zawiya and ribats, all those structures that meant to serve pilgrims, that were are seen today. Most of them, almost all of them, actually, were founded in that period. Some of them were rebuilt or renovated, but almost all of them are from the Mamluk period. When analyzing these data, it seems that most of the buildings were constructed in the 14th century and at the beginning of the 15th century. But not only new construction projects might result in debris that was removed and dumped in the eastern area, the rubble of structures that were destroyed and fell in ruins due to earthquakes might have also been removed to the eastern area as well. Such are the former structure of the Madrasa al-Ashrafiyya, or structures that are recorded by Mujir al-Din in the 15th century and have not continued to exist, such as Zawiya Nasriya near the Golden Gate, or the Kubat Tumar, which stood on the southern edge of the raised platform. Comparing the Mamluk numismatic data from the Temple Mount to coins that were found in Jerusalem excavations since the year 2000, and I'm not speaking about the sample sites, but we took, this is a data set that from the antiquity, from the state treasurers of the Antiquity Authority, of many excavations. So we compared our large sample to this large sample, and we can see that there are similar trends among both sites, about both, let's say, areas. We may assume that rulers who initiated the projects on the Temple Mount also did so in other parts of the city. Anyhow, the distribution of coins frequently matches the previous conclusion mentioned above, that most of the construction projects took place in the 14th century and in the beginning of the 15th century. It is noteworthy that there is a peak of coins minted by Nasir Muhammad ibn Kalaun, who had 3 reigns, and most of the coins are from his 3rd reign. From several inscriptions, we know above renovations that took place around the year 1330 in the Dome of the Rock and other parts of the Haram, including near the southern part of the eastern wall. The highest peak is during the second half of the 14th century, especially from the time of the second reign of Barkuk during the years 1389 until 1399. An inscription from the Islamic Museum in the Temple Mount tells us about a major renovation of the raised platform pavement that took place in the year 1387. The Ottoman and British Mandate periods also contributed significantly to the rise of the eastern area, mainly due to the many renovations that took place in the Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the Dome of the Chain. In addition, several structures were demolished, mainly due to the earthquakes, and their refuse were removed to the eastern area. Such were the Shuk al-Ma'arif building that was situated on the roof of Solomon's Stables at the southeastern corner of the Temple Mount. Also debris from many segments of the Al-Aqsa Mosque that were collapsed in the 1927 earthquake. And the adjacent Crusader vaulted structure that was completely removed in 1943. So also the beginning of the 20th century, also lots of there was also lots of dumping during that time, and as I mentioned before, that there's no doubt that the debris from the renovations that took place in the Dome of the Rock and the Dome of the Chain and the Al-Aqsa Mosque found its way to the eastern area, since many artifacts from these renovations were found in the Sifting. To date, about 100,000 glass mosaic tesserae have been recovered in the Sifting. This seems to have been deposited when the glass tesserae on the exterior walls of the Dome of the Rock were replaced by the glazed tiles during the time of the Sultan Suleiman in the 16th century. These glazed tiles also were replaced, also deteriorated and replaced several times in the 18th century, 19th century, and the 20th century. The many plaster and stucco fragments that have been recovered seems to originate from renovations in the Dome of the Chain. The very large quantity of marble tiles found in the Sifting were probably removed from the walls of various structures, as we can see today all over the compound, and were dismantled and ruined as a result of earthquakes. The lead pieces recovered in the Sifting, I don't have a picture of it here, but we have lots of lead pieces originate from renovations of the cupolas of the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Okay, so what are also old city dumpings on the east in the eastern area of the Temple Mount? This is a major question. I mean, are we dealing here only with earth from the Temple Mount renovations, or maybe from also outside the Temple Mount? So we also suggest to rule out this possibility. First, it seems unlikely that the Muslim Waqf would have allowed debris that is not related to the Haram to be dumped inside Waqf ground. This assumption is strengthened by the tradition mentioned above regarding the burying of material that was removed from the Dome of the Rock near the eastern stairway. This practice seems to imply that the dumping of debris at this site might have been due to the sacredness of their origin, similar to the Jewish Genizah practice. So I still have to look into it. I want to look into it. Is there such a practice in the Islamic tradition? But at least from this evidence, this witness, we know about that they deliberately buried them because they came from the Dome of the Rock and not just, and were not considered as just mundane debris. Secondly, refuse dumps are found all over the old city of Jerusalem, and they also caused a rise of the street level. The urban culture in Jerusalem during these periods was to remove debris. I'm not speaking about organic refuse, but construction debris to the nearest place possible. Thus, there would be no reason to transfer debris from the city all the way to the eastern area of the Temple Mount. And here you could see an example of debris that originated from over the street. This is from the Birkat Israel, north of the Temple Mount, when it was taken out of use in the mid-19th century. And after structures were dismantled and demolished in the Beit Chizda pool just over the street. Ironically, even today, the eastern area serves as a dumping ground for Temple Mount renovations, but this is because of the Supreme Court ruling, Supreme Court of Israel ruling from 2004 that prevents the removal of soil and debris heaps without proper archaeological control. So to sum up, until the medieval period, the level of the eastern area of the Temple Mount was lower by an average of about 10 meters. Since the Mamluk period and until recent times, the area became a dumping site of debris from various construction and renovation projects within the Temple Mount and from its walls. Thus, the archaeological material recovered from the sifting of soil from this area should be viewed as a sample of various locations within the Temple Mount from which debris was removed. Thank you. And also, I would like to thank all the many people who also supported the Temple Mount Sifting project. and participate in the project, and the researchers who help us and worked with us. So thank you all, and this research that we presented here will also be elaborated in our paper that we will submit to the conference book. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zachi, and this was a very good closure, connecting your lecture to Beatrice's lecture, who also dealt with the Marwani Musalla and also with the tiles, and we'll be waiting for the publication of these tiles, which are so important to understand the process. And I'm inviting Eyal to close up our meeting. Thank you.